The hallway outside Studio 7A was buzzing. Lights flickered, stage assistants moved quickly, headsets crackling with countdowns. Inside the green room, Ryan Reynolds adjusted the cuffs of his dark jacket. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, tried a smile, then let it drop. There was something off about this morning. He had done hundreds of interviews before, morning shows, press junkets, serious news panels. He could navigate them all. But The View always felt different. It wasn't just a talk show. It was a battleground. The kind where one wrong sentence could spark a political firestorm. His team had warned him. "You don't need to do this," his manager said hours ago. "It's too risky. You're walking into a set that thrives on confrontation." But Ryan had insisted. Behind the smile, his new documentary about youth mental health meant too much to him. It was based on real stories, real kids, and he wanted the message to go global. He thought The View would give it that platform. A production assistant handed him a stack of cue cards. "Just some prep questions," she said with a forced smile. He flipped through them casually. The first few were standard. What inspired? The documentary. How did he choose the participants? Then he paused. Do you feel actors like yourself exploit trauma for career gain when making films about sensitive topics? He blinked. That was a sharp turn. Who wrote this one? He asked. The assistant hesitated, then mumbled, "That's from Whoopi." He gave a half laugh. "All right," he said. Bold. The makeup artist dabbed under his eyes. "You look tired," she said. "Didn't sleep much," he replied. Documentary. Stuff. She nodded, but didn't meet his gaze. Something in her body language was ... distant. Professional, but cold. He noticed others avoiding eye contact, too. It felt rehearsed, like they were bracing for something. 5 minutes later, he walked onto the stage. The crowd cheered. Co-host Sarah Haynes welcomed him with the usual excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the one and only Ryan Reynolds." He smiled, waved, sat down. Cameras rolled. "Ryan," Sarah began, "we're so glad to have you back. Let's talk about Behind the Smile. This is a deeply emotional project. Why did you want to make it?" Ryan leaned forward. "Honestly, because I've seen too many young people struggle in silence. We celebrate success, humor, beauty, but we hide pain. This film is about pulling that curtain back, showing the real faces behind the Instagram filters." Applause. For the first few minutes, everything went smoothly. They played a short trailer, teenagers speaking into their phone cameras, crying quietly in empty rooms. Viewers in the audience wiped away tears. Then came the shift. Whoopi cleared her throat and leaned in. "You say you want to pull the curtain back. That's noble," she said. "But let's be honest, aren't you also profiting from pain?" The studio air changed. Even the audience grew still. Ryan straightened. "I'm not profiting, Whoopi. All proceeds are going to youth mental health programs. This isn't about money." Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "Is it about image then? Reputation? Because some people say using other people's trauma as a platform, even for good, is still using them." He looked at her, surprised. "Are you suggesting I made this film to look like a hero?" "I'm saying you didn't make it in a vacuum," she replied. "Your film was funded in part by the Caldwell Policy Initiative. You aware they've lobbied against universal mental health coverage?" Ryan blinked. "I was told they supported awareness efforts." "They do," she said. "But behind closed doors, they've also pushed to kill reform bills that would have helped half the kids in your documentary. How do you reconcile that?" Ryan turned to Sarah, who looked just as stunned. "I didn't know that," he said. Slowly, Whoopi wasn't done. "And what about the Hartwell Foundation? Another funder?" "They were flagged 2 years ago by a European watchdog group, suspected of being a front for foreign intelligence. They donated to your film's outreach campaign." "I'm sorry," Ryan said, his voice sharp now. "Are you saying I'm working for foreign intelligence?" "I'm saying," Whoopi replied, "when you stand in front of a camera and say you care about these kids, The world deserves to know who's behind that camera." The audience was silent. Ryan took a deep breath. His fingers were clenched. This film is real. Those kids are real. Their pain is real. If mistakes were made with background funding, I'll own that. But don't twist this into something it's not. "If you brought it here," Whoopi said, "I'm just asking what's behind the smile." He stood up suddenly. "I didn't come here to be accused of being a puppet," he said. "I came to talk about mental health. If you don't want to hear it, that's fine." And then, live uncut, Ryan walked off the set. The camera lingered for a second too long before they cut to commercial. Backstage producers scrambled. Phones rang. Control room was flooded with messages from affiliates and social media teams. Clips of Ryan storming off were already being clipped, captioned, and uploaded. Within 30 minutes, #RyanStormsOff was trending on 3 continents. By nightfall, George Arnault had already recorded a teaser for his next global broadcast. Why did Ryan Reynolds really walk off that stage? And what's the truth behind the documentary that's sparking international tension? Tomorrow night, the story that could shake Hollywood and Washington. And in the quiet of his dressing room, Ryan sat alone, watching the headlines roll. In his phone, buzzed, "Unknown number." A message appeared. "They know you're not safe. Talk to Arnault before it's too late." The video spread like wildfire. Within hours of Ryan's dramatic walk-off, the clip had racked up over 20 million views on every platform imaginable. News outlets from CNN to BBC were running back-to-back segments. TikTok was flooded with edits of the moment, some supportive, some mocking. "Ryan Reynolds exposed," screamed one headline. "Hero or hypocrite?" asked another. But the real storm hadn't started yet. By 9 p.m., George Arnault was standing in front of a massive LED wall inside his studio, a quiet intensity in his eyes. His show, World Signal, wasn't entertainment. It was pressure. Governments listened to it. CEOs feared it. And tonight, he was focused on one man. Behind the smile, he began, voice cold and exact, is the most watched mental health documentary of the year. But what happens when the story behind the story is darker than we imagined? The screen behind him flashed. Ryan Reynolds. Mental health. Foreign funding, U.S. lobby influence. Tone sharpened. We've obtained internal memos. Funding trails. And communication logs linking the documentary's backers to covert information programs used in conflict zones. The same talking points used in Reynolds' film have appeared almost identically in government-backed psychological operations abroad. And tomorrow, we will reveal them all. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his loft. Apartment, blinds closed, phone off, laptop open. Every news site had his face on it. He didn't recognize the man in those photos. His charm had been stripped away. All that remained was a man under siege. His publicist was furious. "I told you this would happen. You should have shut it down the moment Whoopi pulled that card." "I didn't know," Ryan said again, quieter now. "I didn't know any of this." But the truth was starting to slip through the cracks. He remembered the call almost 2 years ago. A man named Gray had reached out, said he worked with a public wellness initiative that wanted to sponsor media pushing awareness on youth issues. It sounded genuine. They even showed documents of support from UNICEF. Ryan never looked deeper. Now he wondered who Gray really worked for. The next morning, George Arnault went live again. This time he didn't hold back, showed an internal email between 2 project managers at the Caldwell Policy Initiative, the same group Ryan had mentioned as supporters of the film. Reynolds is the perfect face, emotionally authentic, media-trained, and globally trusted. He'll carry the message and soften the edges. We can insert the cues around digital isolation and technology anxiety. Then came another document. A donation funnel from the Hartwell Foundation to a European media lab linked to psychological influence research. That media lab had worked on the film's online campaign rollout. The line between activism and manipulation was blurring, and the world was watching. By midday, Ryan's team had gone silent. His agent stopped answering calls. The studio backing. The film issued a generic press statement. We support the cause of youth mental health and hope the conversation continues. No one mentioned his name. Then his personal phone lit up. Unknown number again. He let it ring twice. Then picked up. Mr. Reynolds, said a low voice. Mail.com. You need to get ahead of this. They're going to pin it all on you. Who is this? Ryan asked. The man you met in New York. I work for Gray. Why are you calling me? Because I read the files. And I saw what they're planning now. If you're not a whistleblower, Ryan, you're the scapegoat. A pause. George Arnault is the only one who can help you now. Talk to him. Don't wait for your agency. Don't wait for damage control. The call ended. Ryan stared at the phone. His heart pounded. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Was he just an actor pulled into something too big? Or had he become part of a machine that used human pain to shape public opinion? There was only one way to find out. Called George Arnault directly. The line rang once, twice, then a click. Ryan, George said, without surprise. I was expecting. You? A storm was coming. The announcement of Ryan Reynolds' exclusive live interview with George Arnault sent shockwaves across media outlets, governments, and intelligence agencies. For decades, George had walked the tightrope between journalism and national threat, had exposed war crimes, toppled political dynasties, and uncovered corporate lies so dangerous they triggered international sanctions. But never had he invited a Hollywood Alistair into the heart of such explosive territory. In a quiet hotel room in Manhattan, Ryan sat with a single lamp on and pages of briefing notes spread out on the table. No team, no agents, no publicists. He had left them all behind. He was alone now, willingly. Across the room, a former intelligence analyst named Ava Noor sat in silence, watching him. She had been brought in by a mutual contact, the man who called him, the one who used to work for Gray. Ava didn't say much at first. She only placed a folder in front of him, labeled with a faded black seal and the word Nova. Ryan flipped through the documents. Digital campaign graphs, ad placement data, email chains between producers and behavioral consultants, and one spine-chilling line in a budget spreadsheet. Phase 3 psychological exposure via controlled, narrative youth-based content vehicles with emotionally resonant Western anchors. Content vehicles, Ryan muttered. You, Ava said softly. You were Phase 3. He couldn't breathe for a moment. They didn't just fund you, she continued. They studied you, your reach, your likability. They mapped how your fans responded to grief, mental health, and confession. Then they planted specific phrases in the script of the film. Subtle nudges, not lies, just curated emotion. Enough to reshape public focus. But why? Ryan whispered. Why? Go to all this trouble. Because attention, she said, is the most powerful weapon on earth. And you, Ryan, hold a nation's worth of it. Later that night, he walked alone to the World Signal studio. Arnault's building was fortified like a military base. Armed guards, facial scans, signal blockers. He passed a massive screen in the lobby, looping news from around the world. War in Sudan, a leaked UN memo, a fire in Brussels. And in the corner box, live tomorrow, Ryan Reynolds breaks silence. Inside the prep room, George Arnault was calmly sipping green tea. I hope you're ready, he said. Ryan nodded. I am. But I'm not here to play victim. Good, George replied. 'Cause they'll say you're lying. The governments you implicate, the organizations behind this, they'll smear you. This will follow you forever. I understand. George leaned forward. Then let's be precise. No speeches. No movie tears. Just truth. The next morning, the world froze. Phones lit up. Smart TVs switched to World Signal. By default in hotel lobbies and airport terminals, hashtags exploded. #Ryan Live, #Our No Interview, #Behind the Live. Then it began. The camera panned in slowly. George sat in his usual suit. Next to him, a visibly tense but resolute Ryan Reynolds. "Mr. Reynolds," George said, not even pretending to smile. "You've agreed to speak today without handlers, legal buffers, or edits. Is that correct?" "Yes," Ryan said, voice clear. "Everything I say is mine. No teleprompters?" "Then let's begin," George said. "Did you knowingly work with foreign-backed operatives to produce a psychological campaign, disguised as a documentary?" "No," Ryan said. "I believed I was making a film about mental health. I was wrong. I was used," George pressed. "Used by whom?" "By a network of lobbying groups, influence labs, and foundations posing as nonprofits. They manipulated my goodwill. They fed my project with quiet money and hidden agendas. And they did it so well, I didn't notice until it was too late. Do you have proof?" Ryan pulled out a document, the same spreadsheet Ava showed him. "This," he said, placing it on the desk. "This shows the targeting mechanism. My script was altered through consultants posing as wellness experts. They embedded messaging designed to shift attention away from systemic failures and toward personal resilience. It's a propaganda tool, hidden inside empathy." The studio was silent. George turned the page. "Your documentary featured a teenage Syrian refugee. Her footage went viral, but her family was later detained by local authorities after an anonymous tip. But are you aware that tip came from one of your producers?" Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. "I found out last week. I tried to reach her. She's gone." And yet," George continued, "you pushed this documentary at the UN Youth Summit. Do you understand how that looked? Two foreign governments already suspicious of Western media influence." "I do now," Ryan said. "But this isn't about me versus them. This is about people using real suffering to advance hidden policies. I'm not the mastermind, I'm the mirror." George paused. "It's one more thing, Ryan. We've received an encrypted file -6 terabytes of CUMS, funding records, and video transcripts. It shows your documentary was part of a 3-phase operation targeting youth in 18 countries. Phase 1, culture-based digital fatigue. Phase 2, depopularizing public healthcare reform by blaming mental illness on self-inflicted trauma. Phase 3, that's you." Ryan didn't flinch. "Then I want it released," he said. "All of it. Let them see everything. Every lie, every false intention, every manipulation." George looked directly at the camera. "You heard it here first. In 24 hours, World Signal will release the Nova files raw and unredacted." As the interview ended, security guards flanked the studio entrance. Outside, 2 unmarked black SUVs watched from across the street. Inside one vehicle, a man in a gray suit picked up his phone and spoke quietly. "They went live," he said. The reply came cold and clear. "Then it's time. Phase 4 begins now." Rain began to fall over Washington, D.C. in an underground conference room beneath the Capitol. A classified emergency meeting had been called. The atmosphere was suffocating. Phones were locked in Faraday cages. The lights were dimmed. Every person in the room, intelligence chiefs, senior diplomats, cyber ops coordinators, knew what was at stake. A man at the head of the table slid a single document forward. It's a front-page read: "Project Nova file leak initiated. Source, Arno." "This is no longer a media issue," he said. "It's a threat to national security. A psychological warfare program has been exposed. And now it has a face." Ryan Reynolds. Some smirked. Others didn't. One analyst, a woman from Cyber Command, spoke up. "We traced the data drop. The Nova files came from within the Hartwell Trust's Berlin facility, the same lab that ran youth analytics for several Western NGOs. There are code names, asset rosters, and campaign briefings going back 8 years. Reynolds was just one node. There are others' names," someone asked. "Some already in government, A thick silence followed. Back at the World Signal studio, George Arnault was preparing for night 2 of the investigation. His entire newsroom had gone into lockdown. Phones were monitored, VPNs were rerouted every 30 minutes. And yet there was fear, not of a lawsuit, of retaliation. His senior producer entered with a flash drive. Encrypted comms just came in. Someone from the Caldwell Initiative is offering full immunity in exchange for whistleblower status. George raised an eyebrow. On camera. Off record. For now, George turned to the whiteboard behind him. It had been wiped clean, then filled again with 4 categories: Ryan, Lobby, PISA Ops. And Phase 4. He circled Phase 4. No one knew what it was. At the same moment, Ryan Reynolds sat in a safe house in Brooklyn, protected by private security and isolated from the outside world. Ava Noor was with him, hunched over a terminal decrypting another piece of the Nova files. This, she said. Tapping the screen is a voice memo between 2 executives at a partner media lab. Listen. The audio crackled. If Reynolds breaks, we trigger Phase 4. Public confusion. Discredit his mental state. Link his breakdown to unresolved trauma. Use his own cause against him. Ryan sat back, stunned. They're going to make you look unstable, Ava said. I'll call you delusional. Say you've over-identified with your film subject matter. That you're projecting. Ryan was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, they want me to disappear. That's what Phase 4 is, Ava replied. Erasure. Not physically, mentally, socially. They'll rewrite who you are in the public mind. The next morning, it began. A breaking headline on a popular gossip site: Is Ryan cracking? Sources say actor hasn't slept in days, showing signs of paranoia. On a podcast with close Hollywood ties, Reynolds has always had a savior complex. Maybe this is just an emotional overreach. A trending tweet from an anonymous account with verified insider links. Behind the smile, more like behind the breakdown. Hashtag Ryan's conspiracy. The campaign was fast, coordinated, brutal. But George was ready. That night, World Signal aired footage. From the Berlin facility's security system, footage showing a team of analysts reviewing test audiences reacting to grief triggers inserted into Ryan's documentary. One of the clips showed a consultant laughing as a teenage boy cried during a screening. Now we're getting traction, the man said on camera. This is exactly the level of collapse we need. Kids don't want politics. They want tears. The footage aired for 12 full minutes. And then George dropped the real bombshell. In the final section of the Nova files, he said, staring directly into the lens, it's a document that lists Phase 4 not as a media strategy, but as an active operation, a psychological counter-campaign. It is not designed to protect the public. It is. It was just after midnight in Geneva when the first cyber-attack hit. The World Signal servers, previously thought unbreachable, went dark for 12 minutes. Backup drives scrambled. Satellite feeds flickered. Emergency tech teams flooded the newsroom as George Arnault stood motionless, staring at a blank screen that should have been broadcasting Part 3 of the Nova files. He turned to his producer. This wasn't a hack, he said coldly. This was a message. When the servers came back online, one folder had been wiped clean. The section marked Caldwell Internal Memos Phase 4 Ops. Gone, back in New York. Ryan Reynolds watched. From a secure bunker in Queens, his jaw tightening. Ava Noor refreshed the backup files. Nothing. They hit the relay node in Zurich too, she said. That's NATO infrastructure. Someone high up approved this. Ryan slammed his fist against the table. They're scared. They should be. Outside, it had begun to rain again. Inside George's studio, a decision was made. They would broadcast a live town hall. No scripts, no edits. Just survivors, whistleblowers, and activists telling the world what had been done to them and who was behind it. The invite list went out fast. Viewers around the globe tuned in. First to speak was a 22-year-old university student from Tunisia who had appeared in Ryan's documentary. She broke down explaining how her trauma was packaged by producers into a digestible clip that went viral on Western platforms, but destroyed her privacy at home. Then came a school counselor from Minneapolis who testified that she'd been approached by a health research agency, offering her money to distribute certain kinds of mental health surveys to teens. Surveys later traced to a lab funded by Hartwell. The final guest that night was a surprise, Whoopi Goldberg. She arrived in person, flanked by private security, holding a manila envelope. "I've kept this buried for 20 years, she said, "because I thought no one would believe it." She handed it to George. Inside were transcripts of internal network meetings from a media conglomerate tied to global lobbying operations. One of the lines read, "We don't control what people feel. We control why they feel it." The broadcast hit 98 million live viewers, a record. But it didn't end there. Moments after the stream ended, a classified memo from the Office of Strategic Influence was leaked online. It detailed a quiet collaboration between private entertainment figures and foreign policy think tanks, using celebrity-fronted narratives to guide emotional focus during times of social unrest. Ryan read it twice. "They've been at this longer than we thought," he said. Ava nodded. "And it's not just you. There's a whole list of public figures being monitored, some used, some marked. Marked for discrediting, for isolation, or worse, for recruitment." Ryan leaned in. "What happens if they refuse?" She didn't answer. That night, the White House press secretary held a shaky briefing. Her usual poise was gone. "We are working closely with our partners to evaluate the information released by World Signal. We urge the public to remain calm, verify sources, and avoid conspiracy narratives that undermine national unity." But the damage was done. International watchdogs called for open hearings. Multiple governments suspended funding to certain think tanks and NGOs. European lawmakers demanded an emergency vote on regulating media influence campaigns. And then, suddenly, silence. No new leaks, no new statements. World Signal went quiet. The next morning, a cryptic tweet from George Arnault. They made their move. "We made ours. Tonight, the line breaks." Ryan stared at the screen. "What does it mean?" Ava asked. "It means," Ryan said, standing up, "we're going live again." That night, George's voice echoed through a stripped-down studio. No lights, no music, just static. "Tonight," he said, "we bring you what they tried to erase." He uploaded Nova Black, the final segment of the files. Raw, unedited footage of early planning meetings, faces, names. American and European officials seated with media executives and behavioral scientists, casually planning how to guide emotional engagement through scripted entertainment. Voice stood out in the room, a familiar one. Ryan's old business partner. "I told him it would help people." The man laughed. "I didn't tell him it would help us too." Ryan's hands clenched. But George wasn't finished. "There's one more voice on this tape," he said. "A woman, unnamed. Until now." He pressed play. It was Ava Noor, a younger version of her, hidden behind a voice distorter. "They'll never find out," she said on the tape. "We don't need them to believe. We just need them to feel." Ryan turned to her slowly. She looked pale, quiet. "That was a long time ago," she said. "Before I knew what they were doing, he didn't say anything. I was part of phase 1. I defected when I saw what it became." Ryan stood still. The room felt colder now. "You should have told me." "I thought I could undo it," she whispered. But George Arnault had already moved on. In the final seconds of the broadcast, the screen flashed. Phase 5 countermeasure initiated. Then it cut to black. The world was about to change. Again, the world woke up different. Every news channel, every platform, even the ones that had stayed silent until now, was forced to cover it. Phase 5 was trending globally. Nobody knew what it meant. But the symbol from the broadcast, a black circle with 5 red bars cutting through it, had appeared on buildings, protest signs, and anonymous accounts overnight. People wanted answers. Ryan Reynolds sat at a long table inside a heavily guarded safe house on the outskirts of Toronto. The city had become a neutral ground, at least for now. Ava Noor hadn't spoken much since George exposed her voice on the leaked tape. Ryan hadn't asked her to leave, but he hadn't looked at her the same since. A knock broke the silence. 'Twas George Arnault himself. In person. No more cameras, he said. No more broadcasts. This is the last move. We either bring it all down, or they erase us. He laid down a tablet. On the screen was a simple message from an anonymous source. Phase 5 equals counter-architecture. Use media against itself. Inject the truth into the lie. Ryan leaned forward. What does that even mean? George turned to Ava. She knows. Ava hesitated. Then slowly, she spoke. The early programs used something called narrative. Shadowing, basically. Inserting real trauma into fictional formats to bypass skepticism. That's how we trained audiences to feel instead of think. And now, George asked. Now, Ava said we reverse it. We take their formats, their shows, their networks, and leak the truth inside them. Not news, not exposure, infection. Ryan's eyes sharpened. You're saying we start a misinformation campaign, ... with actual truth? George nodded. Exactly. Leak the real files into fake scandals. Let them chase ghosts while the world wakes up. It was dangerous. It was manipulative. It was ... poetic. And it began that night. Phase 5 activated with an anonymous leak to a gossip show claiming a famous Hollywood director had used NGO money to fund a mind control experiment. At first, it sounded absurd, but viewers dug deeper, found real receipts, real connections, real pain. Next, a viral late-night comedy sketch mocked a fictional think tank controlling youth behavior, only every name dropped in the sketch was real. Real emails. Real emails. Real funding streams. The sketch was taken down in 3 hours. It had already reached 60 million views. Okay, now they can't tell what's fake and what's true, George said. We've broken the format. Meanwhile, internal chaos spread within governments. White House aides began jumping ship. An EU commissioner resigned with a vague statement about the unbearable weight of past decisions. Old allies stopped returning calls. But the real shift came from the people. Millions had begun organizing their own data archives, compiling every Nova file, every whistleblower clip, every quote from the leaked memos. Activist coders created a public timeline mapping how media and trauma had been weaponized over 2 decades. Phase 5 had become a movement. Still, the backlash arrived fast. George's home in London was raided under the pretense of foreign interference. His staff were questioned for 11 hours. One of his editors was detained in Dubai while in transit. Ryan's own past was ripped open in tabloids. Every mistake, every ex-partner, every therapy session speculated on. But it wasn't working anymore. People didn't care. They had already moved past him, past George, even past Ava. The movement had its own momentum now. But momentum has a cost. One evening, while Ryan was reviewing a cache of documents for a potential final broadcast, a private security guard rushed in. Ava was gone. Her room had been cleaned out. Her hard drives too, no note, no trace. She's been taken, George said. No, Ryan replied. She ran. George looked at him surprised. She was phase 1. She never really left it. Maybe this was her arc all along. Ryan didn't sleep that night. And when morning came, another symbol appeared online. A twisted version of the Phase 5 logo, this time with a 6th bar slashed across it in white. Phase 6. What the hell is that? George asked. Okay, but Ryan already knew. She's not running, he said. She's rewriting the narrative alone. Suddenly, the screens around them flickered. A broadcast began, but not one of theirs. It was Ava, streaming live from an unknown location. "I was part of this system," she said calmly. "I trained it. I perfected it. But I also know its limits. George showed you how they controlled you. Ryan gave you the emotion to fight. Now it's time to end it." She uploaded one final file. It began with sirens in the distance, not police, not fire trucks, but something deeper. Citywide alerts across multiple countries. Screens in Times Square, Tokyo, Berlin, and Cape Town flickered from ads to a single message. The Origin Protocol. Israel. Phase 6 has begun. Within hours, governments across the globe issued emergency statements. Several nations denied involvement. Others called for immediate investigations. But no one could deny what Ava Noor had released, a 3,700-page archive of operations. Contracts, test results, and private conversations dating back to 1993. The truth was brutal. The Nova Project had its roots not in media, but in trauma manipulation used during wartime. The earliest experiments targeted children in refugee camps, measuring how emotional exposure through storytelling could control behavior. When the wars ended, the research didn't. It evolved, and the same emotional levers used to calm bombed out. Villages were adapted silently into documentaries, talk shows, viral clips, even mental health awareness campaigns. Not to heal, but to steer. Ryan Reynolds stared at the final document. It was a signed partnership agreement. His name was on it. He'd signed it over a decade ago, thinking it was a simple deal with a youth outreach organization. A clause buried in legal language gave Hartwell Research and its Nova partners rights to narrative repurposing of his charitable content. He wasn't just used, it helped build it. George Arnault entered the room quietly. He had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. "They're calling it the biggest emotional manipulation campaign in history," he said. Ryan didn't answer. "You need to speak." "I don't deserve to," Ryan said, his voice low. "It's not about you," George said. "It never was. And that's exactly how they got away with it for so long." Later that evening, in a dark, empty studio, Ryan stood in front of a camera. Live. No script, no lights, just him. "I'm not here to clear my name," he said. "I'm here to admit I was a part of something unknowingly that changed how the world feels. I thought I was helping. I thought I was spreading hope. But I never asked who was funding it. I never asked who was shaping the story. And I never imagined that behind our efforts to raise awareness, someone was charting influence maps." He paused. "Now, people ask, how do we fix this? How do we move forward? I don't know. But I do know this. If you've ever cried at a campaign donated because of a celebrity face, changed your beliefs because of a documentary, you deserve to know who was behind it and why." Then the camera cut. The message went viral in seconds. And for the first time, no one called it a stunt. The impact of Phase 6 unfolded fast. In Geneva, the UN General Assembly called an emergency summit. Nations agreed to declassify large parts of their psychological operations archives. France and Canada opened hearings into Nova-affiliated media companies. Even the United States launched an independent inquiry, despite pressure from several internal agencies to shut it down. Meanwhile, Ava Noor remained missing. Some said she was in Iceland, others believed she had been taken, or worse, eliminated. But then, 2 weeks later, a new file appeared on encrypted servers across the world. Its title, The Final Edit. It wasn't a document, it was a video. A single, continuous monologue recorded by Ava. She sat alone in a room that looked half abandoned, lit only by a hanging bulb. "You can't undo decades of programming in one broadcast," she said, "but you can change how we tell stories." That's where power lives, in framing, in silence, in camera angles and pauses and who cries on screen. She reached for a folder beside her. I'm giving this to everyone. No more hidden truths. No more manipulation masked as advocacy. You decide what to do with it. The screen faded to black. Inside the folder, final evidence, passwords, raw footage, names of editors, producers, and politicians who knew. The file was duplicated 100,000 times before anyone could block it. By morning, the truth was permanent. George Arnault stepped away from public life. He said what needed to be said, then disappeared. Ryan Reynolds returned to film, but only small independent pieces, partnering with survivors, activists, and young filmmakers whose voices had been drowned for years. He refused interviews. He said, no more performance, only repair. And people believed him. The View never fully recovered. Whoopi Goldberg retired quietly. She never spoke publicly again, but was seen once visiting a trauma center in Nairobi alone. No press. The world didn't fall apart, but it changed. New rules were drafted. Media transparency laws passed. Audiences became harder to fool, harder to move, but when they did move, it was real. The manipulation hadn't ended. But it had been seen, and once you see it, you don't unsee it. In a remote town in Finland, a mural appeared on a school wall, painted by students. It showed a camera cracked in half, but inside it a seed growing. Underneath the words, "Truth is not a headline. It's a wound that finally speaks."